Hi, my name is Eymaan and I did my research on eczema. So what is eczema? Eczema is a term given to categorize a group of inflammatory skin diseases. It refers to a condition where patches of your skin become inflamed, rough, and develop blisters. An intense sensation of itching and severe rashes are associated with this disease, as well as a weak skin barrier. Your skin barrier's job is basically to retain moisture and keep pathogens out. A weaker skin barrier means that there's an increased risk in skin infection. Scientists don't know what the cause of eczema is specifically, or the exact cause of it, but they do have determined that an overactive immune system is involved, leading to development of hypersensitivities to environmental factors. So, some of the history for eczema. Similar skin conditions were described in ancient Egyptian texts, such as the Ebers Papyrus, which is one of the first medical documents that we know of, documented about 3,000 years ago. A little bit more recently, Robert Weiland and Thomas Bateman were two dermatologists that coined the term eczema in 1817. However, their descriptions of the disease don't quite match up with the description of what eczema is today. And then about a century later, in 1933, the first description of atopic dermatitis, which is the most common form of eczema, was established. So here we see Robert Weiland, and then we see a couple of Thomas Bateman's illustrations, which he has a lot more in the atlas. I thought they were really cool, so if you wanted to look into those. So what are some signs and symptoms? I'll start off by saying that eczema does not look the same for everyone. So, for example, people with lighter complexions tend to have rashes that are more red, while people with darker complexions have rashes that are purple, brown, or even gray. However, saying this, there are symptoms that are common for everyone with eczema. So, dry skin, swelling, inflammation, and intense itchiness are major common symptoms and hallmarks of this disease. Patches of thickened skin occur when there's been continuous scratching in an area. Flare-ups are basically relapses of your symptoms, and weeping eczema is a condition where the blisters that can form leak fluid onto the rashes, creating a crust over the rashes when they dry, and this just leads to additional cracking and dryness of your skin. Also, as I mentioned, skin infection is a symptom of eczema, and eczema can actually occur anywhere on the body, but typically it occurs more on your face, arms, hands, feet, legs, eyes, ears, eyelids, ears, and scalp. So, what causes eczema? There are a bunch of different triggers that can cause it, and here are a few. So, weather is a major trigger, especially dry, cold places. Even places with low humidity can trigger it. Fabric materials. So eczema runs in my family actually, and the people that I know are personally triggered by wool and cotton and leather. Those are their main triggers. In terms of fabric, skin products and makeup can have harsh chemicals that trigger it. Soaps, fragranced products, contact with specific allergens, emotional stress, which is tied into hormonal imbalances, and this is especially seen in women during menstruation, during and after pregnancy, and during menopause. Those are periods of your life where you're experiencing intense and sudden fluctuations in hormones that can trigger it. Also, just in general, environmental pollution, so pollutants like smoke, can trigger it as well. Eczema is not contagious. Like I've said, that the scientists or the researchers don't know exactly what the cause of eczema is just yet, but they do know that it is a result of an individual's genes interacting with the environment around them, causing their immune system to develop sensitivities to specific triggers. So, eczema is a umbrella term that refers to 7 main types of dermatitis. The first is the most common, atopic dermatitis. It occurs at any age and has been found to be associated with hay fever and asthma. Contact dermatitis is when a person comes into contact with an allergen, so environmental triggers play a role, and it's not hereditary. If you compare the two pictures, so atopic dermatitis, you'll see the rash on both limbs, so it's not specific to one area, and then contact dermatitis is specific to one area, generally the area where the allergen came into contact with your skin. Seborrheic dermatitis is the third type. It's specifically the inflammation of the scalp or areas that are prone to become very oily. So wherever you have your sebaceous glands, seborrheic dermatitis can develop there. It's more commonly seen in men. So fourth type is called dyshydrotic eczema. It's also called palmophilax eczema, and that is an ancient Greek term that means bubble. It refers to the blistering aspect of this type. So as you see in the picture, there's a blister, and this type of eczema actually mainly occurs on your fingertips, palms, and your feet. It is associated with an intense burning sensation. And since the blisters are associated with this, you can also see weeping eczema be a major symptom for people with dyshydrotic. The risk of developing dyshydrotic eczema increases if you already have a different type. So if you have like atopic dermatitis, you can develop this. The fifth type is called neurodermatitis, and it gets its name because the continuous scratching further inflames the nerve endings that are present in your skin, so that's why it's called neurodermatitis. The rashes appear to be scaly, and you can see that in this picture. It's more of like scaly patches. It's one of the rarest types, so it affects 12% of the population, and it's generally confined to 1 or 2 places on the body, so it's not everywhere. The sixth type is called nummular eczema. Nummular is a Latin term that means coin, and that's because these rashes look more like lesions. They look like coin-shaped patches, rather than just like scaly patches. These patches tend to ooze blood, as you can see in the picture below, and is more commonly seen in men, which I find this really interesting because nummular eczema is linked to poor blood circulation, which ties into our last type of eczema, but our last type, stasis dermatitis, is actually more commonly seen in women. So stasis dermatitis is actually caused by poor blood circulation, and it looks very similar to varicose veins. It occurs when the valves in your veins become stiff and leaky, and your blood flows backwards and begins to pool in your lower limbs. So a little bit about the pathogenesis of eczema. This is a relatively new discovery, but scientists have discovered a protein called filaggrin, or FLG, and filaggrin is a filament-associated protein that basically binds to keratin filaments in your epithelial cells and between your epithelial cells, kind of providing a structure for your epidermis. So it plays a really big role in skin barrier structure. And scientists have found that the genes that encode for FLG can have mutations, and that these mutations lead to fewer functional FLG proteins, which increases barrier dysfunction because there's less of the FLG proteins to hold your cells together and to provide that structure. They've also found that inflammation, which is one of the major symptoms of eczema, further downregulates FLG proteins, so the symptoms of eczema just make it worse. This discovery has just really shifted researchers' focus to look at proteins that make up the structure rather than immune system cells that attack your skin. or just hypersensitivities. They're focusing more on the protein aspect of what makes up your skin barrier. I will note that 40% of people with FLG mutations do not develop eczema, so FLG is not the primary cause of eczema. So something I found really interesting was the scratch itch cycle. Basically, when you scratch your skin, keratinocytes release a cytokine called thymic stromal lymphopoietin, or TSLP. And TSLP activates a bunch of different immune system factors. So it activates dendritic cells, it activates type 2 T helper cells, and it induces mast cell degranulation. It also causes further induction of cytokines, so you'll see IL-5 and IL-13. And all of this immune system induction, it is where the aspect of a overactive and hypersensitive immune system comes into play. TSLP also stimulates sensory neurons and creates a positive feedback loop, telling basically your central nervous system tells you to keep scratching, and just makes your symptoms worse. So incidence and prevalence, eczema is pretty common. 1 out of 10 people have it. More commonly seen in babies, and that makes sense because babies are exposed to an entirely new environment after birth and their bodies have to adjust. There's been about a 4% increase in people who suffer from eczema since 1997, and that also makes sense because environmental pollution has only been increasing, and even before 1997 it's only been increasing. The environment is constantly becoming more and more toxic to us, so it makes sense. 80% of children that experience eczema in their childhood outgrow it later on, but there are people who have long-term symptoms into their adult lives. There's also a condition called chronic eczematic eruption of aging, and that is when someone who's typically over the age of 50 develops eczema for the first time out of nowhere. So this graph shows the prevalence in regards to age. Younger children have it more, and then there's a slight increase after the age of 50. And the map on top shows percentages of people with eczema, so the darker areas have a higher percentage of people that have it. It's more commonly seen in women. In general, eczema is more commonly seen in women. Treatments, corticosteroids are prescribed for inflammation. Flucloxacillin or penicillin prescribed for infections, and there are a variety of medicated skincare products that don't have harsh chemicals in them that can trigger it. Therapies include light therapy. It's basically concentrating natural or UV light to your skin, but this has a lot of risk factors, one of them being cancer. Wet dressings and relaxation therapies to modify scratching habits. Moisturizers, lotions are generally better than creams because they're lighter and have a higher water content. So to be able to manage your eczema, you should know your triggers. That's how you know what to avoid and what to stay away from. In general, avoid scratching because it's only going to make it worse. Stress, I know stress is generally hard to manage, but there are a lot of ways to help with that. So healthy diets, exercise, sleep, medication. Moisturize is very important. Mainly avoid unscented products and washing. Lukewarm baths, not hot water. Hot water dries out your skin very fast. Here are my sources, and thank you for watching.